Now, in order to do this, we need to go through a brief overview of Israelite chronology. So, in round numbers, Abraham should be located about 2000 BC. 600 years later, in about 1400 BC, we have Moses and the Exodus. Scholars do argue about the date of Moses and the Exodus, so take that date with a grain of salt. And then about 1000 BC, we have the reign of King David. And it's important that we realize that David ruled over a united kingdom. All of the 12 tribes were under his control. Now, the reason why this is such an important fact is because when David's grandson Rehoboam takes the throne in about 930 BC, the kingdom divides into two separate entities, a northern tribe and a southern tribe. The 10 northern tribes are now known as Israel, with its capital as Samaria, while the southern tribe is known as Judah, with its capital being Jerusalem. And now that we have a northern and southern kingdom, it also means we have a northern and southern king. The king of Judah is a descendant of David, while there is no fixed lineage of the king of Israel, as there is a constant overthrowing of kings. The next major event in Israelite history is the Assyrian domination of the Near East. And it is the Assyrians who will conquer the northern tribe of Israel in 722 BC. And lead them into exile, never to return. And this is where we get the idea of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. After the Assyrian reign, Babylon becomes the next world superpower, and it is under the Babylonian reign that the southern tribe of Judah is now conquered in 586 BC. And then finally, the Persians topple the Babylonians and allow the Jews to return to the land. So unlike the northern tribe of Israel, Judah does return to the land, and it is from the southern tribe of Judah, which current Jews today primarily claim ancestry from. Interestingly, the word Judah is actually where we get our word for Jew and Jewish from, because if you are from Judah, you are Jewish. Fantastic. Now that we have this chronology before us, how does it help us understand the book of Isaiah? Well, the book of Isaiah is composed of 66 chapters. And the traditional understanding of the book is that Isaiah wrote the entire book himself in about the 8th century. However, critical scholars do not believe this to be the case. Rather, they believe the book of Isaiah was written during 3 different periods of time and by 3 different authors or schools of authors. So firstly, we have the first 39 chapters, which scholars label Proto-Isaiah. It is written in the 8th century when Assyria is a major global power. Chapters 40 to 55 is known as Deutero-Isaiah, and scholars believe it to be written during the exile, while Babylon is the major global power. And finally, chapters 56 to 66 are known as Trito-Isaiah, which scholars believe to be written once the Israelites have returned from exile and have commenced rebuilding Jerusalem, and thus was written while Persia is the major global power. Now, for our purpose of analyzing Matthew's quotation of Isaiah 7:14, we really only need to focus on the first 39 chapters, which was written under the Assyrian reign.
Isaiah is important because it is one of the first prophet to reiterate the promise given by God. God promised David that he will never fail to have someone from his line sitting on the throne. And in Isaiah, the fulfillment is going to come true, not in Isaiah's time, but eventually, that God has not forgotten what he promised. And even though Isaiah we know that he had a 50-year career, and some people would say he didn't write the later part of Isaiah, but if we read the start of the book of Isaiah, it says these visions concerning Judah and Jerusalem. Really and truly, at this time, it was Judah and Jerusalem that was left. The northern kingdom has gone. Judah and Jerusalem were saved because of God's promise to David from the tribe of Judah that someone from the line of Judah will continue to sit on the throne. So therefore, Judah and Jerusalem has been spared. So Isaiah 1:1, these visions concerning Judah and Jerusalem came to Isaiah, son of Amos, during the reign of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And he had a 50-year career. And even though he probably did not live through or went into exile, but really, these are visions. It would not be inconceivable, especially when we know that Daniel lived in the exile, and at the same time as he was living in the real time, he was also receiving visions from God. So it would not be inconceivable that Isaiah did the same, that in Isaiah 1 to 39, it was real time. And even though it's sprinkled with prophecies, the later part is mostly prophecies. And Uzziah was a good king. He made many reforms, but he was proud. It says there that if God punished him with leprosy, so he had leprosy throughout his life, he did not show up in public, but his son, I think Jotham, was the one who was playing king on his behalf. And then we come to Ahaz. King Ahaz, especially in Isaiah 7, was the conversation between Isaiah and Ahaz, when Ahaz refused to ask the Lord for a sign. He refused to refer to God altogether. And Isaiah has to say, listen well, you royal family of David. You aren't satisfied to exhaust my patience. You exhaust the patience of God as well. And then we go into the famous line, the virgin will conceive a child, he will give birth to a son, and will call him Emmanuel. But regardless of what you do, Ahaz, regardless of the fact that you never ask for help from God and you're so self-sufficient, God will intervene in history as he promised. And then we read of the reign of King Hezekiah, when Hezekiah was being threatened by Sennacherib, and he went to seek the help of Isaiah, and Isaiah said, no, the Lord says he will never enter Jerusalem. And as I read the Gospels, the start of each Gospel, Matthew and Mark, where it harkens back to the prophets, the time has come. This is a good news. God is intervening. God is sending someone, a new king, and whose kingdom is everlasting. And that's spoken by the prophets, especially from Isaiah. It quotes from Isaiah 40, verse 3, where he sends a messenger first. And Luke also says, well, many people has written an account, and he goes into Isaiah 43, when the messenger will be sent. First, he speaks of the birth of John the Baptist, who was that messenger, and also the Gospel of John, after the prologue, it speaks of Isaiah 40, verse 3, sending the Messiah, the messenger first, and then the Messiah. So this sets up the book of Isaiah. It's a really interesting book. And I think I've said before, of the view of one Isaiah, not two, not three, definitely not three. How do I know? Because these are visions given by God. You won't think that God would give his faithful servant visions of the future and that it would come true. I believe that. And the whole reason for this series is so that we reacquaint ourselves with the Old Testament. Oftentimes, Christians don't know how to deal with the Old Testament. But all our foundations, the foundation of Christianity is in the Old. So in studying the Old, we are able to understand the New better, and therefore our faith is stronger.